Welcome to the final details video for the Quilted Alice Shoulder Bag by Oro Rosa Patterns. In this video, we're going to be adding a pull onto our zipper tape, finishing the connectors, and sewing the strap. In the pattern instructions, the first thing that she has you do is sew the strap, but I'm going to skip ahead and finish the connectors first. Because as I said in the intro video for this pattern, I am doing the connectors a little bit different, where I'm going to actually paint the edges to seal them up rather than fold the edges over and stitch around. So what I've done here is I have cut the connectors about 1/2 inch smaller all the way around, because we don't need that extra fabric that is going to end up being folded over to the back side. So I've fused it, and you can see in the fusing and prep video, you can watch me fuse this and then cut the shape out. So this is regular faux leather that has Decoville Heavy fused to the back side. So to start out, I'm going to be using the Giardini brand Base Coat Dense, and this is just a white liquid that dries clear, and that is just going to give the edge of our connector that thick, kind of rounded, almost rubbery edge that you see on leather handbags in retail shops. So definitely don't go straight for the paint if you want that thick, kind of professional looking edge on your raw edges. So that is the Giardini Base Coat Dense, and I like to do 2 layers of that, and I also file the layers in between painting. After that, I am going to use this light brown paint. It's Echo Flow Edge Flex Edge Paint. And I got this from Tandy Leather, and it is the perfect brown for this tan Mora leather that I got from Emmeline. And the way that I apply the Base Coat Dense and the paint is I use regular wooden kitchen skewers. These are super inexpensive, and I usually just have one for each product. So one for my Base Coat Dense, and then one for my brown paint, another one for my black paint, that kind of thing. And then I just use them and then reuse them until the film has built up so much that I can just toss them and use a new fresh one. So I am going to take one of my skewers, and it's important to shake the product really well before you use it, or stir it up really well with a fresh skewer. And I am just going to dip my skewer in and get a little bit of product on the point of my skewer, and then I'm going to just run the point of my skewer along the edge of the connector. And less is more. This is only the first coat. We're going to do 2 coats of this, so you don't need to build it up too much right now. And if you do get a little bit on the front of your connector, it's easy to just wipe it away while it's still wet. And I'm going to continue and just go all the way around until we have a full coat over the whole thing. Now, one tip that I like to give is that I rarely ever touch the skewer to the connector, to whatever I'm painting. I rarely touch the tip of the skewer. I just apply the liquid and then sort of move the liquid around with the point of the skewer. So I just kind of glob it on a little bit and then move it around so that it spreads. The liquid is sort of self-leveling, where it just kind of takes care of filling in all the nooks and crannies of the edge. And you just have to be in charge of moving it to the next spot. Now this base coat does have a shelf life, so if you are new to painting edges or if you don't do it very often, they do have a smaller size that you can grab so that it doesn't expire before you can get through the jar. And then I like to look at it from the front, and sometimes there's going to be like a thicker area and then a thinner area, and so I just kind of glide my skewer over it like this and even that out. Wipe away anything that gets on the front. So I can already see that the base coat is drying where I started. I started right here in this kind of middle section. It's already beginning to dry, and I'm going to let this sit for about a half an hour before I do anything with it once I'm done. I like to give it a little longer than half an hour if I can, but at least a half an hour. And our connector now has a complete first coat of base coat. You can kind of see it there. And it'll start to build on the second layer. So I actually like to set these things on spools of thread so that the edges don't dry to my paper towel when I'm working. And I'm going to move on to the second connector and then come back. All right, I am coming back to our connectors now because the first layer of base coat has dried, and I'm going to just do a light sanding or filing with a regular Revlon nail file. I'm not fancy at all when it comes to this kind of thing. It gets the job done and it's super inexpensive. So I'm just going to go around and kind of buff out some of the rough edges, or maybe some of the edges that have a little bit more of a bump than I would want, just before I put on the next layer. Now, I don't get too intense with filing this first layer because a lot of things will be covered by the second layer of base coat. So I only do kind of a light pass. And we are going to go back in with our base coat dents and put our second layer on. And I'm going to use the same technique as before. And just kind of lightly touch the product to the edge of the connector, and you'll start to see that sort of rounded edge forming. And the product is white right now, but it will dry clear. And then as soon as this is dry, we can sand again and apply our edge paint. Okay, it has been about a half an hour and the edges of my connector are pretty dry. So I am going to take my file and just go around the edges and kind of smooth out any ripples and bumps. Places where the base coat got a little thicker than others, and just gently file those away. Okay, so I'm just going to dust these off now, and I am now going to go in with a fresh skewer and my edge paint. Now again, I got mine from Tandy Leather. But Giardini also has really good paint. And pretty much the same technique as before, but this is much more forgiving since your surface is a lot smoother. And I just go along the edge just like this, nice and smooth, and it seems to just fill in the width of the edge. See if you can see that right there. It's just really nicely colored with minimal effort to get it to reach every spot on the edge there. It kind of just fills it in on its own. So I get a good amount on the skewer, enough to not drip anymore, and I just quickly run it over the edge. Only touch the skewer lightly again, or else you'll get a streak. And the paint is really fast drying. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes before you can start working with it again. But you do want to make sure that it is ready before you attach the connector to the bag. And again, if you get any on the front, you can just quickly wipe that away with your finger. Okay, the first connector has had all of its edges painted, and you typically only need to do one layer of the paint as it does cover pretty well. So if you can see those edges, they are nice and smooth, and the color matches really well to my vinyl. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the second connector. And next I'm going to be adding my zipper pulls to my main zipper closure. And the way that I do this is the same exact way that I showed in the zipper pocket instructions. So I just take a look at my zipper tape and I determine which side of the tape has the last tooth on it. And for me, it's this side. So that's the side that's going to be inserted into the front of the zipper first. And then I'm going to look down the back end of my pull and insert the other side. I'm going to grab the tape from in front of the pull and I'm going to kind of wiggle it around until the teeth meet up in the same order that they were in before the pull went on. Okay, there's one, and we are going to do the same thing on the other side and add a second pull. All right, my two zipper pulls have been added to my zipper, and now I'm going to sort of reach into the opening at the top here and get the fabric to lay flat. Just like that. And we are going to clip that on this along the sides just so that it stays in place. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Just kind of reach down in here, make all of these layers lay flat. Make sure that the zipper teeth are aligned with the side seam. And there you go. All right, and we are going to set this aside and work on our strap. Okay, here we have our strap, and on the wrong side, we are going to mark a line that is in the center of our strap. All right, so we're going to be drawing our center line on the wrong side of our strap all the way down, and I've cut the 20-inch strap. That's the longest one in the cut chart. Okay, there's our center line. And I'm going to use double-sided tape down this line. If you don't use double-sided tape for this, the instructions do show you how to just clip, which is basically the same process. It's just not using tape, it's using clips instead. So once that is taped, I'm going to remove the paper, and we are going to fold the long edges in to meet the center and stick them down. Okay, I have flipped this over, and I'm just doing the same thing to the other side. Okay, here is my strap with the two long edges folded in and stuck down in the center, and we are now going to fold that once more in half so that all raw edges are now contained within the fold of the strap, and clip that in place. And I can show you here, we're just folding it in half and clipping it in place all the way down the length of the strap. All right, here's our strap completely clipped, and we are now going to stitch all the way around the strap so that it is fully closed up. Okay, here is our completely sewn strap all the way around. Next, I'm going to be adding the strap end hardware to the end of our strap, and I like to use a bit of glue inside the strap end. I use this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. It's good for lots of different materials, and I just put a dot inside the channel of the strap end, and then I add my strap end right on the end there. And if any glue kind of globs out, I just wipe it away with my finger. It's not super glue, so it isn't going to dry right away. So there is that side. And I'm going to do the same thing on this strap end. I just have a little bead of glue in there. Not too much, it's just going to help keep this in place. And I'm going to make sure that I am putting the front of the strap end on the right side of the strap, and that there aren't any twists. So both strap ends are on the same side, front and back. All right, so those are just going to sit on the end right there really quick before I install the screws. And for the screws, I like to dab a little bit of this thread locker medium strength. It's by Permatex, and it's the blue kind. And this just helps your screws lock in place after you screw them in. So I have my tiny screwdriver, and I'm going to pick up one of these screws and screw this right in. And you have to be really careful with this thread locker not to get it on anything that has a print on it. On my normal machine, I have a ruler printed on my platform, and the thread locker took it right off. So it's very sort of powerful. All right, and that is going on nice and tight. And I'm going to wipe off the excess thread locker there. So our two screws are installed there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, there's that. So our two strap ends are now secured. So make sure that you throw this paper towel right away and wash your hands if you got any thread locker on them. All right, next we are going to fold over the end of our handle with the wrong side of the metal hardware folded to the underside. And we are going to measure about 1.5 inches. So this is going to be folded over by about 1.5 inches. And then we're going to punch a rivet that is about 5/8 of an inch away from the end of our handle. So I'm going to just place a clip there so that it stays in place while I measure 5/8 of an inch away from the very end of the strap. And I'm going to place a dot right in the center of the strap, just like that. And then I am going to punch a hole through both layers of the strap right at that dot. Okay, and that will be my rivet hole that I will use to install the strap onto the bag, but we are not ready to set that rivet in there yet. So do the same on the other side, and then we will be on to the next step. All right, the paint on both of our connectors has dried, and I am now going to stitch all the way around the connector. What you should do is pull long thread tails from your needle and then begin top stitching all the way around and end your line of stitches right in the same stitch hole where you began, and then pull long thread tails again and tie them off. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, we are approaching the beginning of our stitch line, so we've gone almost all the way around, and I'm going to slow down and make sure that my needle ends up in the very first stitch hole. So I'm just going to go forward really slow, and then there we go. So my needle is down in the hole of the very first stitch, so I'm going to lift it up and pull long thread tails. And then you can see here I've stitched all the way around, and I've ended my line of stitches right in the same hole that I began. And I'm going to flip this to the back, and I'm going to tug on those thread tails that are on the back of the connector so that the front thread loops to the back. And I'm going to pull it back and tie it all together. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing to the second connector. Okay, both of my connectors are now top stitched all the way around, and you can see back here where I tied my knot, I also left my threads a little bit longer so that the knot doesn't unravel, and I painted some super glue over the threads. So basically super glued the loose threads to the stabilizer. And one other thing that I wanted to note, I started right at the inside corner of the connector, and I think that that was a bad idea. I would start, after doing it just now, I would change next time and start somewhere along this straightaway. Here's why, because when you fold this over and add it to your bag, your hardware is going to be sitting right here, and it's going to sit right on top of that knot. And two things could happen. One, the movement of the hardware could aggravate the knot down the road and cause it to unravel. And two, you could potentially see the knot just a little bit. If the hardware was to like flop to one side, you could potentially see inside here and then see the loose ends, or they could work their way out. And if the knot was down here somewhere, that would be securely glued to the bag, as you'll see us do in the next steps. So next time, and I make all the mistakes so that you don't have to. So I would put my knot, or I would start and stop my top stitching somewhere along one of the straightaways right here. Okay. Next, we're going to apply glue to the wrong side of our connectors. This is the super glue that I use, and I definitely recommend it. It's the Gorilla Glue super glue with the brush and nozzle. So if you untwist the top here, there's a nozzle on top, so you can apply the glue that way. But if you unscrew the whole top, there is a brush. And I love the brush application. I think it's so handy for this type of technique. So what I'm going to do is glue one of the sides of this connector first by just being really generous with the glue around the edges. Like that, and a little bit in the middle as well. Try to avoid getting it in the middle, this kind of narrow area in the middle, because that's where our hardware is going to sit, and you don't want to get glue on your hardware. But you do want to make sure that you're getting a little bit close to the edge, but make sure it's spread out enough to where you won't have a lot of glue kind of gooping out the sides. Now we have to work fast, but we're going to put the top of our bag here kind of across the widest part of the connector. Like that. And you don't want it to be too low, or else that will limit how wide you can open your bag. Now I'm going to actually clip that on really quick just on the sides. You can use large binder clips for this if your clips aren't big enough. And I'm going to quickly get a D-ring onto the other side. There we go. And next I'm going to finish applying super glue to this side, just being generous around the edges. But kind of steering clear of that hardware, and spread it around so that it's not too goopy around the sides. Okay, and we're just going to fold that right in half. Hold your hardware up high like this and begin to stick this down. Okay, and I'm going to add some clips here. Okay, now here is where you're going to want to get a little bit more precise with your glue, because you can see here on the edge, this is still pretty separate from each other. So I'm going to go in with my brush and just really carefully add some glue to the inside and then quickly close it shut. Okay, it's important that your connectors are glued to itself along the side edges. As you can see here, this is open, and so I'm just going to carefully grab my brush and apply some glue right inside the connector along the edge, and then quickly clamp that shut and apply a clip here. Okay, so the idea behind the glue is less to secure the connector to the bag and more to just place the connector on and secure the edges of the connector to itself. And that way you won't see inside these folds at all. Now, the thing that's actually going to secure the connector to the bag itself are rivets. So what we're going to do next is grab the rivet placement guide, which looks just like this. It looks just like one of the pattern pieces for the connector, but it has the 3 dots that are going to help you with your rivet placement. So what I'm going to do is just punch the holes out of the rivet placement guide. And that way I can put my placement guide right over my connector, just like this. And I'm going to just kind of center it inside the connector, making sure that where I mark my rivet at the top, if I were to punch a rivet through that area, it would clear my hardware. So I can just pinch with my fingers right where that dot is, and I can feel that it's not going to hit the hardware. If you're concerned that maybe your hardware is a little bit chunky or something like that, just go ahead and lower that dot, and then your rivet will clear your hardware. So I'm just going to make 3 dots right there, and that's where I'm going to punch my 3 holes for my rivets. But I'm going to come in here and just punch the rivet hole through all layers of the connector and the bag. Okay. This hole up here is only going through the connector. Okay, and then this one, lastly. Now here is where you're going to want to use the 2 different sizes of rivets. Now this long one over here, that's a 10mm rivet. This one here is an 8mm rivet. And the long ones are going to be needed for these 2 down here. And the 8mm are best for this one up here. And so there's 4 8mm rivets on the materials list. You're going to use 1 here, 1 on the other connector, and then 2 for your handle, so that's 4. And then you're going to use the 10mm rivets, 2 here and 2 on the other connector, so that's 4. That's where those rivets go. So I'm going to take one and put it through this hole, take another 10mm rivet and put it through this hole here. And then you want to take the caps of the rivet and just kind of press them on until they click and they kind of snap closed. Let me show you here. Okay, I'm putting the cap on and pushing it on. There we go. And those are not set yet. I have to take this over to my press and set those rivets. They're just sitting there waiting to be pressed. And then my 8mm rivet goes inside there. And I'm gonna take the cap for the 8mm rivet and push it on. Okay, now I'm going to take these over to my press and press them so that they are set. All right, those 3 rivets are now set, and we are ready to repeat all of these steps on the other connector. Okay, we are in the home stretch of our bag. Our 2 connectors have been attached to each end, and the only other thing that we have to do is attach our handle. So here's the handle that we created and put the strap ends on. And what I'm going to do is just feed one of the ends through the D-ring, and we've already punched the holes for rivets. So I'm going to grab one of my 8mm rivets. And when I say 8mm and 10mm, I do mean post length, not cap size, which is a different measurement. If you're interested in learning more about rivets, I am going to be posting an everything you need to know about rivets video. So go ahead and feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to, and keep an eye out for that. All right, both of these rivets are now in place. And I'm gonna go take this over to my rivet press and set these rivets. All right, your Quilted Alice Shoulder Bag by Oro Rosa Patterns is now complete. Thanks so much for hanging out with me and making your own Quilted Alice Shoulder Bag. Just a reminder that I am Lavender Twine. I write my own patterns and make my own videos. I decided to do something different this time and create a video tutorial for the lovely Alexis of Oro Rosa Patterns. If you've been a fan of either of ours for very long, you may know that we are best friends and I support her business 100%. So go check out the rest of her patterns, and there's also links to mine as well in the description box. Thanks!